Call to order the Grand Island Public Schools Board of Education meeting. This is the December 12th, 2024 meeting. Notice of this meeting has been advertised in the Grand Island Independent, which is the district's designated method of giving notice of these meetings. We want those in attendance to know that copies of the Open Meetings Act are available at the entrance to the boardroom. If anyone in attendance is interested in addressing our board, you are welcome to do so. We simply request that you complete the appropriate form and turn it into us so that you may be recognized during the request to address the board part of our meeting. If you have not already completed the form, please see the staff person outside the entrance to this room. Public comment is welcome. We do ask that no signs be brought into the boardroom. Mrs. Dibbert, would you please call the roll?
Mr. McFarland.
Present.
Mr. Hawley.
Here.
Mr. Garcia-Mendez.
Present.
Mrs. Albers.
Here.
Mr. Sykes.
Here.
Mr. Barcenas.
Yes.
Mrs. Jurgens.
Present.
Mrs. Wilson.
Here.
Mr. Helinski has given prior notice of his absence.
Thank you. All right, the first item on the agenda tonight is the consent agenda. Consent agenda is to be approved as follows. Items number 3.1 through 3.6. This is the consent agenda as published. Would anyone like to remove any items or add any items to the consent agenda? Does anyone have any potential conflict of interest on agenda item 3.3? If so, please state the check number that you will be abstaining from voting on. Ms. Albers.
I will be abstaining from voting on check numbers 97716 and 98154. I will approve all other items on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Mr. Eric Garcia-Mendez.
I will be abstaining from voting on check number 98221 on agenda item 3.3. I approve all other items on the consent agenda.
Mr. Hawley.
I'll be abstaining from voting on check number 97998. I approve all other items on the consent agenda.
Okay, at this time I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Albers. Discussion? Seeing none, may proceed to a vote. Motion passes. Item number 4, special recognition. We're going to recognize the GIPS Esports team that won the NESEA 2024 State Championship League of Legends. Mr. Chris Ladwig, Mr. Lemberg, and Coach Benjamin Martin. Or Mr. Hubbard.
Yes, yes. They have events going on right now over the school. So, Mr. Fisher, Mr. McFarland, Grand Island Public Schools Board of Education, it is my great privilege and honor to announce to you and to bring to this podium the head coaches of our 2025 State Championship Esports team, Mr. Benjamin Martin and Mr. Luis Mejia. Come on up, guys.
Thank you. I'm so proud of our League of Legends team for their work and dedication they've put into this season. In League of Legends, each player has a position, and while it may be a little confusing to people who don't play, it's pretty important to our players. So I'm also going to reference their game name, because that's what they go by when they're playing in the game. So Elixir, or Lincoln, he plays top lane for us. Player 3, Damien, plays jungle. Salem Silly, Sean, plays mid. Cheetah Lancer, Caitlin plays bot, and Melina or Alexandra and Kitana Khan Jackson play support. We went undefeated in our Nebraska NSCSA division and brought home the state championship. We also participated in the Central Regional Division with schools from all over the place: Minnesota, Ohio, Texas, Kansas, Iowa, and we placed 13th. Our team has worked hard to get to where we are now, and with all but one returning, hopefully even better next year. Esports is not a sport by itself. It's a category of competitive video games with players performing at the highest levels of competition and skill. Practicing as a championship team may look a little different from how you might see your kids or grandkids playing at home. Because one thing we always teach our kids at the very beginning is playing does not equal practice. There's a big difference between practicing as a team and just playing at home. And one of the things, this would be a great Christmas gift to give any of your kids who want to get better at any game that they're playing, is record the games and review them. Because what you can't see, you can't change. Here's some of the skills it takes to build a championship League of Legends team. Persistence, grit, determination, teamwork, communication, problem solving, dedication, and practice. Lots of practice. The thing is, these skills don't just make for great championship level League of Legends players. These skills are the building blocks to great human beings, which is what we strive for with all of our extracurricular activities at GISH. Thank you for supporting esports here at GIPS. We've had a team go to state every single year that we've been a group, but this is the first time that we've placed, with hopefully the best still to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to invite all of you to come on up here in the horseshoe. We've got some certificates of recognition for you.
You can.
All right. And then we get to take pictures.
Yeah, go up there too.
All right.
We're going to get a picture of everybody.
All right. Congratulations. Sexton. Caitlin. Congratulations. Damien. So, coaches, come on up here.
All right, come on up and
Congratulations to you guys.
squeeze together if you can. Yep. All right. Yeah, find a window. There you go. All right. And then everybody look here. All right. 1, 2, 3, smile. Now hold it. Parents, if you want to get photos, go for it. All right, I think we're good. Congratulations, everybody.
Sorry.
Okay, item number 5, request to address the board. Each person addressing the board will be allowed 3 minutes. The Board of Education has the prerogative to limit speaking to 3 minutes when there are 3 or more patrons to allow speakers an opportunity to address the board in a timely manner. We allocate up to 30 minutes for addressing the board at each regular board meeting. Please face the board, not the audience, when you speak. We want to hear what is being said, so we ask the audience to refrain from making comments or sounds that make it hard to hear the speaker. No signs are allowed in the boardroom. We will not engage in dialogue with patrons presenting to the board. The purpose of the request is to address the board is to listen to the patrons. The board president and superintendent will identify staff to follow up on information requested from patrons when necessary. At regular business meetings, any school district-related matter can be presented to the board, but only agenda items can be acted upon during a given meeting. At special meetings, comments will be limited to the subject of action items of the meeting's agenda. Speakers will not be permitted to make defamatory comments or use abusive or vulgar language. Expressions of personal complaints about staff or students are discouraged at public meetings. Concerns about individuals should be brought to the attention of the appropriate administrative authority. Specific building or program concerns should be brought to the attention of the building principal or program supervisor. Okay, starting off tonight, our first speaker will be Michelle Carter. Michelle, you have the podium.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Carter, and I'm here wearing my hat as a fifth grade teacher at Dodge Elementary tonight. When I first started teaching, we got our teacher's manuals and our students. We closed our door to our classroom and we taught. Times have certainly changed, and today's instruction looks vastly different. Our classrooms have responded to the needs of the job market that currently exist. Now skills like collaboration are highly valued. As a teacher, I've experienced the stress of being on your own in my previous district. Shortly after I came to GIPS, we adopted a new reading curriculum. Dodge had the benefit of 4 sections of each grade level. I was added as the 4th section. My good friend Nancy Chavez was a longtime teacher at Seedling Mile, also teaching 4th grade. And I still remember the stress that she expressed because we were going to have this new curriculum, so that meant we had all new lesson plans to write, all new activities to prepare for, and she was by herself. We at Dodge, being good friends with Nancy, said, come join us. And so we, through email was still not used a lot back then, but through email and through meeting together at grade level meetings and on the side at the coffee shop, we included Nancy in our planning so that she was not alone. I don't know how many times Nancy thanked us for including her and sharing the burden of all of those things with her, but it was a lot. And if you know Nancy, you know it was a lot. Today, a lot of the overarching planning has been done by our task forces, but it still falls on the classroom teachers to personalize and tailor our instruction to best meet the needs of our students. Our classrooms are driven by collaborative work with a grade level teaching partner. We can talk specifically about students' progress and achievements, and we can also share with our classmates, my teammates. My 5th grade teammate and I just yesterday, did your students bomb the quiz? Yes, mine did too. Okay, let's talk about it. That can't happen in a 1-section school. My own students are products of Dodge Elementary, and I'm very proud of the work that we do and of our students. I did check with my principal first, but we would welcome any Seedling Mile families to come and tour and see what Dodge is like. We have a culture of close family, both between the teachers and our students. Being a 4-section school would allow us to offer many of the programs we've been unable to because our specialists spend a half a day every week at Seedling Mile offering their special classes there. We would be able to expand our programming, and all students would benefit from that. Our schedules have been altered because of our specialists going there, and that's really restricted us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Our second speaker tonight is Miss Julie Gordemaker.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Julie Gordemaker. I'm a parent of a Seedling Mile 4th grader. I have had a child at Seedling Mile since 2016, and I am the current PTA president at the school. I am not at all surprised when we got the notification that there was a meeting this November about the future of our school. I was surprised when I received a text message on April 25th earlier this year stating there would be no kindergarten at Seedling for the 2024-25 school year. That was the first I and many parents heard that was even on the table. The news that we wouldn't have a kindergarten and then subsequent 1st grade, 2nd grade, etc., was pretty much the death knell for our school. Not only was it a punch in the gut for our community, it was awful for our beloved kindergarten teacher, Mandy Julesgard, who poured her heart and soul into teaching kindergarten at Seedling Mile for 23 years. That situation was handled very poorly, in my opinion. It left a lot of families in the lurch for this current school year, especially with only 3 weeks left. You should have either ripped the Band-Aid off and closed the school or left the kindergarten in place for the current school year. When and if you do close a school, it would be nice to have a transportation option for the kids that live around Seedling to get to Dodge. There are quite a few neighborhood kids that live close to Seedling and that walk, and it's pretty tough to get to Dodge. So maybe if you could at least survey around the area and see if there's an interest in a busing route. Listen, I understand the bind that you guys are in. I know their money and the staff and everything like that. I know it's tough. It's hard to staff buildings, but people want small schools. Small schools are great. And how many kids are on wait lists to get into other districts for a small school? But in the end, I will respect whatever decision you make, and we'll make adjustments to make it work. We loved our time at Seedling Mile, and we are so thankful for the teachers and staff for giving our kids the best building block for their education. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Speaker number 3 will be Valerie Emery.
Good evening. My name is Valerie Emery. I am a mother of 2 girls at Seedling Mile. My husband and I are both graduates of GIPS, and he also went to Seedling. Prior to our girls coming to this school, they attended a private school, and we also homeschooled. We chose to come to Seedling Mile because of the reasons that you're closing it. And moving in the middle of elementary was hard. My daughter cried herself to sleep many nights because she knew no one. You won't have to see the impact that your decision makes on these families, but just know that they are happening, as many of us already have tears in our home with just the thought of losing their school, friends, and teachers. While the fear and anxiety goes up, their confidence and test scores will go down. I know that you don't consider putting kids from the same schools together in 6th grade. And as scary as it is for a 6th grader, imagine it for a 2nd grader. So I hope you'll at least have the decency to put a few familiar faces in each class for these kids if you're not going to be able to put all the Seedling Mile kids together where they are going, as they are coming from a school of 82 to an overcrowded building of 300 to 400. We have since enjoyed our time at Seedling Mile for many reasons. The girls have both gotten individualized attention from teachers and paras. They have gotten to know many students in different grades, something that is very hard in a big school. At Seedling, they often pair up other grades for projects allowing for collaborative learning. This would be next to impossible in big schools due to logistics. Our kids have gotten to know others who have different backgrounds and cultures, and we feel very fortunate for that. The group that will feel the biggest impact of Seedling's closure will be our less advantaged families. They often lack the resources to even have winter coats and hats and a lot of the basics that we take for granted. Many of these families live near Seedling and walk to and from school due to both parents working. Asking these families to commute to Dodge is a big deal. Because GIPS has not said that they will provide a bus, that means kids will pile in cars, often without enough seatbelts for everyone to get to school. This is unsafe and obviously against our community values. This is more than just saving money. This is the future of many families. You've put us through an emotional roller coaster with closing kindergarten last year, splitting up families and making some feel forced to leave the district, and that is what will happen again. I know you will say kids are resilient and they will bounce back. Some might bounce back in a few weeks, but for some it might be months. Please remember that these are the same kids who just had to bounce back from COVID. How many things are you going to make them endure in just a few years? In closing, I want to state how much Seedling Mile has meant to my family. It's a wonderful school with a great atmosphere. Please do everything you can to keep our school open. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Speaker number 4, we have Amanda Fieldgrove.
Hi, good evening. I am a parent that has 5 kids that have gone through Seedling Mile. Currently, I have 2 there that are in 4th grade. I felt that school has always been great. All of my kids have been prepared to go on to middle school and then on to high school. We've always felt at home there and very safe. It's a very small little community that you're always welcome. I've always felt that, my kids have gotten all the individualized attention they needed for all of their different needs in each of their classes. I have a few that need extra help with reading, and I've never felt that has been not addressed and not, they've always felt like it's been where it needs to be. My whole family has enjoyed the atmosphere there. You know, we feel like we're welcomed at every second that we go in the building. All the teachers know you by name. They know all of my students, all my kids by name, and they know that the older kids that went there always felt at home there. This school is very close to my house. Moving to a different school is going to put a different spin on things as to how kids get to school and how we get home from school every day when you both have working parents, and that's going to cause a strain in our house just to figure that out. Of course, like parents do, you do figure it out because that's what you have to do. So I understand where you're coming from and what's going to happen, but just as a parent, I just want them to be aware that it does affect our kids a lot more than you might think. So thank you.
Okay, and speaker number 5, Ms. Jane Richardson.
Hello, my name's Jane Richardson, and I am an alum of Seedling Mile, as well as my 3 brothers. In fact, when we went to Seedling Mile, it was country school, District 74, and my dad used to have school board meetings in our living room. So it's come a long way since then. My 3 daughters went there, as well as my niece and my 2 nephews. I would love for my grandchildren to go there, who also live at Keister Lake near us. It's just a wonderful, small community, 1-unit school. I just recently heard that you have not, I think in the past year, did not allow transfers, which kind of surprises me, because I know how crowded some of our other schools are. So it seems to me that might be maybe a small solution that could help populate the school. I'm not sure what the data looks like on the other classes. I know this incoming kindergarten class was too small. I don't know what the data looks like on other incoming classes or how full the other classes are, but I would really like to see that data to make sure that we're not closing a school that could be fairly well populated. Transportation is a concern as well to me, as one of the other speakers said. There's lots of children right around the school that go to that school, and as you all know, there's the low-income housing right out there, and all those kids walk to that school. I'm just really not sure how the attendance would play out. There's been many wonderful teachers there, both past and present. Once a teacher gets there, they love it. They stay for 20 to 30 years. It's a great school for teachers. I also thought the training, using it as training school, was great. It's a smaller school for some of these principals to get trained in before they go to the bigger schools. Like another speaker said, people like to send their kids to smaller schools. I'm sure you've seen how some of the smaller schools are popular. In closing, I don't know what you would do with the empty building. I recently had a chance to tour principal, and that's basically empty. I would just hate to see another empty building on your hands. Please find a way. I know it's a fiscal bind, but please find a way to keep Seedling Mile open. Thank you. And thank you for all you do and all your time away from your families. I do a similar role, and it takes a lot of time and dedication, and without great people like you, our community would not be what it is. So I really appreciate the job all of you do.
Thank you very much. Okay. Looks like we have to go back to consent agenda, item number 3.3. We do have an individual that needs to abstain on one check. Mr. Barsonis?
See, I didn't put an alarm for that one. That was a reminder so I need to abstain from check number 96956 and approve the rest as submitted.
Thank you. Okay. Information items, number 6.1, operation of Seedling Mile Elementary for the 25-26 school year. Mr. Matt Fisher.
All right, what I'm gonna do is walk the board through information that we put together around Seedling Mile and why we feel like the board needs to have discussion about the continued operation of that building. And so we'll walk through this presentation information. Certainly as the board has questions as we're walking through, go ahead and jump in and ask. I may ask some of our other district leadership team members to come up and help answer some of those questions. And then once we're through the presentation, then would encourage the board to have discussion around the information that's shared here, around the information that was shared by our public comments, and then, you know, that's where we're at for tonight. It's an information item. So with that, I will go ahead and start walking through some of this information. Seedling Mile does have a long and really very positive history. It was founded in 1888. The building there has been rebuilt several different times. The new facility that's there now was built in 1991. It is an excellent building. It is a very nice building. They've captured a lot of the original look of the building in different places around the building. So really a very nice building. As was alluded to in some of the public comment, it's been home to hundreds of very quality teachers, and certainly thousands of students have gone through that building and gone on to be very successful students. It was named a Blue Ribbon School, a national Blue Ribbon School, in 2014. So certainly very positive recognition for the good things that go on at Seedling Mile. So again, very rich, long legacy in the Grand Island community. You know, I think when we think about those teachers that have been there over the years, that brings us to our current staff that's there, and they, are excellent people. We have very good teachers in the classrooms there. We have very, very strong support people in that building as well. And I think that second bullet point there, when we think about our mantra of every student, every day a success, I think that is something that you see very clearly when you're in that Seedling Mile building. I think they do really embrace the needs of the students and really work to serve those needs. So I think, again, lots of very positive pieces about the Seedling Mile building and certainly the staff that's there. I think that last bullet point, I get the chance to walk in and out of our buildings all the time, and I think every building that I'm in, I always have a good sense of, positive things taking place. And certainly Seedling Mile is very definitely one of those buildings you walk in and you feel good things happening there. So there's certainly nothing in any part of what we're thinking about that is because of a failing building or, staff that is not performing at a very high level. I think it's important to recognize that there are lots of really positive pieces around the Seedling Mile building, around the Seedling Mile community, around the Seedling Mile staff. Just a quick review of some of the things that were brought up in the public comment. The fact that it is a one-unit school. It is the only one-unit school that we have in the district. So it is kind of a unique animal from that standpoint. The kindergarten situation was referenced, and certainly I think we would agree with the fact that was a very unfortunate situation that developed unfortunately, late in the year last year, where we realized that we were, going to be short of elementary staff, and only at the time that the decision was made, we only had 9 students who were indicating an interest in enrolling at the Seedling Mile building, and we just felt like we could not dedicate one of the staff members that we had to educating only 9 students. And so we made the decision to not have kindergarten at the Seedling Mile last year. And unfortunately, it was late, and that did put a strain on staff and families. So, and again, that's part of why we were having that discussion now, because we really feel like we do need to make a decision as to where we're going as we move forward, so that families and staff know where we're at. Currently, we have 82 students enrolled there, and we did allow transfers in. So that's, again, and if you look there, 25% of the students that are enrolled there right now were either opted in from other school districts or transferred there from within our own district. Currently, we have 10 full-time staff members dedicated to that building. So that's just a quick review of some of the statistics that are in place. And I think from there, we want to talk a little bit about the challenges that we feel currently we face with that one-unit school building. So the first hurdle deals with efficiency, and one part of that efficiency is staffing and programming. So in addition to those 10 full-time staff members that are there, we're also utilizing 12 part-time staff members who are, in that building a part of the day, and then they also have assignments in other parts of the district. And those 12 staff members basically create an equivalence of 4 additional FTEs for that building. And so those FTEs include our traveling specialists that we bring in for PE, for music, for the SECA program, media specialist, special ed programming, and we do bring some in, but unfortunately, as you see in that second bullet point, some of the special ed needs that we have in that building we're currently serving through online services only, because we don't have enough special education staff available to bring in person staffing that would serve those students' needs. So again, it's working, but it's really not an ideal situation where we're serving those needs through an online service. The bullet point number 3 there, programming inconsistencies due to the limitations of it being a single unit school. Again, and I think Ms. Carter indicated some of these things, the limited in-class support. When we only have one teacher teaching each of the grade levels, there's not an opportunity to do sharing between those staff members, and really sharing between the students in those groups. In most of our schools, we're able to divide our students out into multiple groups for different, those students that are at different reading levels. They can be split into different groups in a more, diverse way than we can do that in a one-unit building. We still try and have reading groups. It's just harder to do when you don't have as many support personnel and you don't have as many teachers to spread those different groups across. And so again, I think that's part of the programming problems that we see with a one-unit school. The administrator that serves there, we've long ago determined that that's not a full-time principal position. So the principals that we've had there have all served in different roles. Currently, Mrs. Wimhoff, that's the principal there, she splits her time between being the principal, being the academic coach, the gifted and talented instructor. We don't have a nurse there now on a regular basis, so she gets to do some nursing, as does the secretary and other people as well. And then again, I think going back to some of the things Ms. Carter talked about, was that PLC process where we're really trying to bring teachers together and help them, you know, analyze what's working in classrooms, and being able to talk between themselves about, okay, that quiz that they took that didn't go so well, why didn't it go well? What did we miss in our teaching that we need to go back and reteach? I think those conversations are some of the most powerful things that we have for growing our staff members. And unfortunately, in the situation that our teachers at Seedling are in, they don't get that amount of sharing to the level that we do in other buildings. Other part of the inefficiency really deals with cost, and this is something that's existed for you know, some time. You know, it's always been less efficient to run a one-unit school. The numbers are listed there. The NDE per pupil cost for students all across the state, a little over $15,000, $15,082. This is from the 22-23, which is the latest data that's been compiled by the state. If you look at that same 22-23 data for Grand Island Public Schools as a whole, we're actually a little more efficient than the state average at $15,027 per student. But if we look at that 22-23 data for Seedling Mile, then that cost goes up by about $2,700 per student at $17,753 per student. So again, that's an illustration of that inefficiency of a one-unit building that existed before we ever did anything. Now, obviously, as you know, we moved the kindergarten out this last year, that inefficiency that we're projecting for this year grows considerably. So if you look at the per pupil cost that we're projecting for this year, it's $22,680. Again, because you have less students. You still have most of the same staffing needs that you had before, but you have less students. Now, we went back and we actually projected that cost if we had gone ahead and held the kindergarten class there, had that one additional staff member back in the calculation, and that would have lowered the cost down to $21,288. And so the last number that's there is a projected 25-26 number, and that would be if we didn't put a kindergarten or first grade class there. This year we have 19 students in the 5th grade. That's the largest class that's there. So that group would be moving on, and if those 19 students went away, the one staff member that you would need to serve the first grade class was removed from the equation, then obviously you see that the $28,000 per pupil cost is kind of where we would land if we decided to go that route. Cost savings, looking at this, if we use today's dollars and just started looking at what savings the district could realize, just from the staffing, and again, looking at that staffing that would not include any of the teaching FTEs, there's about $373,000, almost $374,000 in savings just from the staffing that we wouldn't have to put in place if we weren't operating the building. And again, that doesn't include any of the teaching, because again, the assumption would be that if we weren't operating Seedling Mile and all of the students chose to go to the same place, then we would still need to add teachers back into the equation to accommodate the additional students that would be coming in. So we didn't figure any of the FTEs that were teaching FTEs as part of this equation. Very likely, we probably would need fewer teachers because, again, I think there probably would be some spreading out that would take place. We would definitely be able to better utilize those specialists without having that traveling, and might be able to save something in that area. So would project that the savings that are shown there are on the low side, that we would definitely probably realize additional savings. That final bullet point there, as far as nutrition services, that is, the personnel that we have that are part of our lunch program, a breakfast program there. And again, all of the staff that we would be talking about not utilizing at Seedling Mile, we would be utilizing at other places in the district. So we're not, this would be a situation where really there would be no one losing their job if we decided to not operate Seedling Mile. They would just be reallocated to other positions across the district. The second hurdle that we really see with Seedling Mile is just the minimal projected growth in a couple different ways. First of all, if we really wanted to make Seedling Mile, efficient, what we would need to do is to grow that building into at least a 2-section building. And in order to do that, we would have to renovate the facility to make it a 2-section building. And we're right now at that 30-plus year age of the building, so we're starting to see some maintenance pieces that we're having to do to that building. So again, I think if we were truly going to make Seedling Mile highly efficient and align and address some of those concerns that we talked about, there would have to be a significant investment in the building to make that happen. The overall projected growth for Grand Island Public Schools, if you look at that second bullet point there, right now we're actually in a downward trend in terms of our projection. Our kindergarten class this year was smaller across the district. And if you look at that 23-24 last year, our fall membership count was 9,349. This year, that fall membership count was 30 less. Projecting next year's, we would be 86 students less. And 2 years from now, almost 200 students less. So we're actually in a down cycle in terms of our total enrollment. Now, we know Grand Island is growing. We know that, we're continuing to see immigrant population growing across the district. So at some point in time, we would expect that trend to reverse, and we would start seeing our student numbers increase. But right now, as we look at the next several years, we're in a downward trend right now. And this is really a state and national trend, both in terms of that enrollment and then also in terms of districts looking at efficiencies of buildings and making the same kind of decisions that we're forced into right now. Kearney has got a 1-section building that they're taking a look at. Scottsbluff has a 1-section building that they're currently considering not operating. And again, it really is a two-pronged piece when we talk about that efficiency. From a financial efficiency, there's obviously some downfall to operating a single section. But then when you put that together with the staff shortage that everyone is experiencing across the state and the nation, it really puts you in a situation where you have to take a hard look at your overall operations and how can we make things work. So coupling that with what's really going on in Grand Island right now from from a housing standpoint, I think that's a big part of that hurdle with projected growth. You know, right now, the city is not showing any kind of housing development taking place in the Seedling Mile area. All of the housing that's currently, you know, in progress or projected is either in the southwest part of the city, at the south side of town on the west side of 281, or in the Good Life District to the north of Highway 2. And so those are really the two areas where substantial growth is projected for housing in the city. The only projected growth in the Seedling Mile area right now is commercial. And so to think that area is going to have a population growth is, you know, just something that is not currently something that we could say is going to potentially happen. And I think, again, as we're thinking about our long-term planning, with those projected growth in those other areas of the community where we don't have schools, I think part of our thought process has to be around, you know, at some point in time, you know, we may have to consider undertaking construction of other buildings in other parts of the district. So again, going back to how do we operate as efficiently as possible so that when that time comes that we may have to look at other buildings, we're prepared for that. So that brings us to what's next, and really brings us to what our district leadership team feels like we have to recommend to the board. And that really is basically that we don't operate Seedling Mile for the 25-26 school year and really for the foreseeable future. Because we know we're going to experience staffing challenges again this year. You know, we already know from the college visits and the things that we have done to try and recruit staff that there is no more staff members out there this year than there were a year ago. In fact, there probably are less. So we know that we're going to face staffing challenges again this year. So I think that, you know, with that in mind and the cost inefficiencies, I think we're forced to make that recommendation. I think in conjunction with that recommendation, if the board would decide to go ahead and follow that recommendation, then I think there are some follow-up recommendations that we would also be making, and certainly that is that the staff that's currently at Seedling Mile is granted priority for, you know, accepting whatever preferred placement would be available across the district. So we would want to give them the best opportunity to be in a position that fits them. I think we would look at taking the Seedling Mile excuse me, attendance area and adjoining it to the Dodge attendance area. Again, Dodge does have the capacity. As was referenced before, Dodge is built to be a 4-section building. Currently there are 3 sections there, and those sections actually are, you know, at a manageable level. So certainly I think that being able to bring the students, all the students, if that's what they chose to do, from Seedling Mile to Dodge would be a possibility. But we also know that families, if this happens, are going to be in different situations, and it's going to make more sense for some of those families to transfer to other buildings. And so we also would be recommending that there be a special transfer request window before we start our other registration, for families to be able to request where they felt like fit the best for them. Transportation certainly was one of the things that we had thought about when we met with the families, and again tonight that was a concern that's been shared. So I think part of our recommendation would be that we definitely need to give strong consideration to providing transportation from the existing building to, wherever it made sense to transport. Again, depending on what the students would decide to do, that could look, a number of different ways. And then the other recommendation really that we would make with this is simply that the board work as quickly as possible to make a decision on this. We don't want a situation like we had last year with the kindergarten. We need to get a decision made one way or the other, and so that our staff members know and that our families know what the future is going to be moving forward. So that concludes the information that I have to present. I'm ready to answer questions. If there are questions, otherwise we'll turn it over to the board for discussion.
Ms. Albers.
So this reminds me of when we talked about shutting Stolly Park down just years ago. And that's when my kids went there, and it was terribly upsetting to think that they were going to have to switch schools. And of course, that didn't happen. The bond issue didn't pass. And being on the board now, I can't believe the bond issue didn't pass. But I do feel a lot of empathy for the families that are struggling with this and for their kids, and I'm just terribly sorry that they're experiencing that. When we first started talking about this, one of the things a lot of us on the board talked about was transportation. That's just a big concern. And then when we were in a meeting, free and reduced lunch rate, is it 90%? It's 90% at Seedling Mile, which means that those families have a lot of other difficulties besides just food, transportation being one of them. So, I think that's going to be just really a priority for all of us on the board, that we make sure that transportation is offered. I don't know how you coordinate that, but I just think that's really going to be a priority going forward if this ends up happening. And we just need to keep the lines of communication open. We need to over-communicate so that all the families that could be impacted by this really feel like they have some sense of control of what's happening, and so they're able to really inform their children of what's going on as well.
Ms. Jurgens.
I also just want to offer the fact that this has not been an easy discussion for us. This is so heavy, and I have never had children that have gone through Seedling Mile, but I've known a lot of teachers who've taught there and parents of children who've attended Seedling Mile, and the reports are nothing but glowing. I thank you, Mr. Fisher, for making a point to talk about the fact that this school is special and has been special and has a terrific record. So that isn't even up for consideration, the quality of the school. This is simply so difficult. And I appreciate the mentions of the need for us to consider transportation, and as Ms. Albers spoke about, the fact that 90% of the students attending there have, they're in households that have financial challenges. These are things we have to consider. The question I have for you, Mr. Fisher, would be about, so I know you talked about capacity not being a challenge for Dodge, and thank you for sharing that, but can you talk about the readiness to receive at Dodge? Commentary from faculty there, like what's the tone of Dodge in preparation for this?
When we started having, discussion around this, we did share with the Dodge staff and gave them that heads up that, hey, this is something that's being discussed. And I think overall the feedback we've got has been positive. I know Michelle talked about it. I think that the opportunity to be back in a 4-section setting really does bring some benefits, that we talk about the PLC process. Rather than having 3 colleagues together, you have a 4th colleague. So now you're, again, one of the big advantages of multi-section buildings is you also have that opportunity to, as students clash with one another. You can do some movement so that you can spread students that are, not getting along out. So that's another one of the great opportunities there. And I think she also talked about being able to be back to having full staffing with their specialists and not having to, and I think that's one of the challenges, both in those schools that are sending specialists to Seedling, as well as the challenges for Seedling is their schedules are built around when those specialists are. They're not built around what the students' needs are. They're not built around what's necessarily best educationally for students. They're built, this is when we can get these people here. And so I think, to your question, I think Dodge would be very welcoming of the situation.
Mr. Sykes?
So I went to school in St. Louis in a district that had some students bust in from a different district for several years, and I was very curious about your comment about being able to keep Seedling Mile, potentially keep them together should they choose to go to the home school, which you're looking at being Dodge if we go in this direction. I don't know the benefit of, like, if you guys have thought about that possibility of the benefit or the cost of doing that, because I think I saw some of that when I was growing up. There was some cost of keeping those students together, but there was also some benefit. I didn't know if you guys had thought about what was brought up tonight. And I've got one more question after that too.
I think that certainly where it would make sense, we could certainly do that. I mean, obviously you've got 3 sections there now. You're going to add a 4th section. Can you make most of that 4th section up with Seedling Mile students? Sure, you can do that. And again, I think then you have to weigh that with some of the other pieces that you need to look at. But again, we want the best landing. If this is a decision that's made, we want the best landing for those students. And if the best thing for them is to keep them together, then I don't see a reason why we wouldn't do that. If there are, again, if there are places, and there are some, student challenges at Seedling Mile, just like there are student challenges everywhere else. And if we can split some students up and alleviate some of the conflict that exists, then we probably will do that as well.
Thanks. Like we saw both of that where it was like there was some real benefit and there were some real challenges, like some of that us and them versus mentality in our school buildings. And so whatever, if we move that direction, like I just love that was brought up. The other question I have is that idea of empty building. And I've asked before, like there's a difference between, we just sold Wyandotte, and I think for people to hear the difference between the layout of Seedling Mile versus the Wyandotte building and where the district sees the benefit of keeping that building, at least for now.
Yeah, and I didn't say that in this presentation, but our recommendation would also be that we don't get rid of the building. As I did say, it's a very good building. And I think it's a building that is structured, like you said, a lot better for education. It's rather than being an open concept like the old Star building was, the Wyandotte building, it is structured with classrooms. And so I think as we think about some of our other programs that we have in the district, there's certainly some of the programming that we have that could be in that building, and probably would serve it very well. There's probably also the opportunity maybe to find a partner in the community to do, something else in that building that would be beneficial, that we could, work with them to retain ownership of the building, because I do think that at least in the foreseeable future, we would want to. There's the potential at some point in time we may need to do a renovation in one of our elementary buildings. We might need to use that building for a year or two to handle students while we're in a renovation. Or, the city might be wrong. Growth might happen in that area. So I think it's definitely a building that we would want to retain, and unless somebody comes along and makes us a ridiculous offer that we couldn't refuse. But I think for the most part, because it does, it is structured so that it can be used for a lot of different things that would serve our purposes.
Mr. Garcia Menez.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for coming to speak. I think it takes a lot of courage and guts to come and speak in front of strangers that you don't know. So thank you for letting us know your thoughts and feelings, and I greatly appreciate that personally. Again, just to reiterate, this is a really tough decision. I mean, last year we were talking about budget, and now we're talking about Seedling Mile. So it's not fun, I want to go back to the point that a parent made about mental health and the students and just supports in that. I started to think about, like, if we do a move forward, right, with the closing of Seedling Mile, are students going to get some of those mental health supports, and what does that smooth or warm transition look like in your eyes, right? Like, will students and parents get to go visit some of the schools maybe that they're interested in? Will they get to visit teachers? Will they get to have like a day dedicated to really just walking around the building if they do move to like Stolly or to Dodge? If you could just talk more about those supports for some of the students.
Yeah, obviously we don't know what it looks like, and until a decision gets made, and then we start. The first thing that we're going to need to get a sense for is where do families want to go, and then how do we structure opportunities for them to look at buildings, and we've talked with all of our principals across the district about if this happens, to expect different families to want to come and look, to have calls, to have questions, and I think all of them are certainly understanding of the situation and looking. We're in the child business, so all of our schools are in that business, and they all understand that this is a challenging time for students and families that if they are uprooted. And so, I think, do we have specific plans? No, because we don't know exactly, where those needs are going to be. Have we talked about it? Have we shared with principals? Yeah, we've been laying the groundwork that if this does happen, that we know that there is going to be that need to accommodate families and give them opportunities to get a sense for what is the best building for us.
One other question that I had was on the admin role, how Mrs. Winhoff is currently split with some of the academic coaching and gifted and talented instruction. Can you speak a little bit more to that? Like, I know in the slideshow it just said that she can take on other admin roles, but by taking on those admin roles, does that mean that we need to look for a different academic coach and add more funding for that, or what does that entirely look like?
Because she is the academic coach for Seedling Mile, which is kind of a challenging role because she's also the boss. I mean, and that's really part of what we've tried to create with the academic coaches is somebody who teachers will really feel like is a partner working with them, not necessarily the person that's evaluating them. So that need for an academic coach at Seedling Mile wouldn't exist if Seedling Mile is not operating. So really what we would look at, with Mrs. Wimhoff is, probably if we had a principal opening across the district and she was interested in, obviously we would consider her for that, but we know, especially if we bring an additional 82 students into Dodge, that there's probably a need for an assistant principal in that role, because it will definitely be the biggest building that we have. And so we would really look at, and part of her assistant principal role could still be doing some academic coaching, but we already have an academic coach there, so we would really be primarily looking at her in terms of an assistant principal role.
Mr. Barsonis?
So some of my answer or questions been answered, but I think again, thank you for coming and speaking. I mean, this is never this. So I've been trying to figure out. You know, we have a lot of things in common from the conversation that we had with at Seedling Mile, the stuff that you brought in today. I think we can't deny that we have great staff at Seedling Mile. Right? We have great students. We have great. That's not one of the issues. We can agree that we don't want to see an empty building. We got to do something else, and we are not talking about selling it. That is just an earmark to say we need to continue that conversation. We can agree that kindergarten process was not as smooth as maybe we would have liked, right? And that impacts how we see it, what can happen. I agree that I think parents should have the opportunity to, if that conversation is every student moves in, everybody gets bussed into the same school, great. But if other parents want to go to a different school, you answered that question. I think from what I've heard other principals, there's an opportunity there that some of them might engage in. You know, thinking that we could bring in more students to Seedling Mile. I think I asked you this question about the issue is we need to make it at least a 2-unit school, so that we need to continue to have that conversation of hopefully the city was wrong and we continue to build there, but that doesn't make this decision any easier. If we were to keep the doors open right now as it is, last year you talked about, you know, you talked about budget. As a district, we're not required to provide transportation, but over the past years, our district saw it as a priority and did it. We had a budget shortfall that we needed to look into, and that's something that went away. But the conversation of transportation is still there. If we continue to have the doors open, how does our budget impacted? Where would that would mean that then other programs are cut, right? Is there?
Well, you know, we made it through the cuts last year, and we had conversations around closing Seedling Mile as one of the cost-saving measures that could be, you know, put on the table last year, and basically we decided that was not a direction that we should go at that point in time. So, you know, financially, if everything stays the way it is right now, can we financially continue to run Seedling Mile? Probably we can. Does that mean we're going to, you know, and we can probably do that without cutting something, but there might be, you know, obviously other places where we can use those dollars to benefit students across the district. So, and then obviously right now we're, you know, the state is looking at a significant budget shortfall, which invariably probably gets handed down to some extent to school districts across the state, because schools are obviously one of the large users of state funds. And when the state's short of dollars, probably eventually that's going to impact school districts. And we are heavily dependent on the state for the dollars that we use to operate our district. So if we looked at things right now today, do we have the dollars to continue to do what we're doing? Yeah, we probably do.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to be like a gotcha or anything like that. I just think it's one of those conversations that I know we're going to continue to have, right? So how do we manage that ahead of time? Let's see here. So thank you for that for now.
Okay. See nothing further, so thank you, Mr. Fisher.
Okay. And again, going back to that last recommendation, I think the board, you know, if they feel like this is something that they would like to take to a vote, they should do that as quickly as possible so that people do know what the future is.
Thank you. Okay, item number 6.2, American Civics Bi-Yearly Report. Ms. Kara Cool.
Thank you for the opportunity to present this evening. My name is Kara Kuehl, and I am one of the curriculum coordinators for the district, and one of the many hats that I wear is secondary social studies coordinator for the district. So I have the opportunity to present to you tonight on to fulfill the requirements of Nebraska Public Law 79724 and Board Policy 2230. So the purpose of this presentation is to provide information about our district's social studies curriculum and how it meets the requirements of the American civics education as outlined in Nebraska Public Law. This is a biannual presentation, and it's one of the requirements of the law. So I first want to provide just a little bit of a brief overview as far as what the focus of Public Law 79724 is actually all about. At its core, this law is about fostering civic competence and ensuring that students gain an understanding of American history, government, and the responsibilities of citizenship. And it really highlights the importance of foundational principles like the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and civic engagement. It also promotes the inclusion of multicultural contributions and perspectives within our curriculum and our teaching. So one of the first stipulations of this law is that the social studies curriculum needs to be aligned with the social studies standards that the district has adopted. And so our district has adopted the Nebraska state standards for social studies that were adopted in 2019, and our K-12 social studies curriculum is fully aligned with those 2019 Nebraska social studies standards. We use those standards to really guide our instruction to ensure that students develop that knowledge and skills necessary to understand American history, government, and then those civic responsibilities as outlined in the law. I also want to mention that this is also in alignment with our Grand Island Public Schools priorities. Our district is really committed to providing high-quality instruction, and in order to support that classroom instruction and support learning expectations outlined in the standards, we promote and use high-quality, standards-aligned instructional resources. And so I want to mention then that we do have high-quality instructional resources being in use in our district to support those social studies standards. Our 612 classrooms utilize TCI social studies curriculum or resources as their primary resource. It is an inquiry-based resource. And then we've also been implementing the DBQ project, which is an additional resource. It's a really cool resource where students analyze primary source documents and then create written responses to those. This really aligns with our district literacy goals as well by fostering that critical thinking and evidence-based writing. So by making sure that we're leveraging these resources, we're making sure that our students are meeting both those social studies standards as outlined and also meeting the requirements of the American civics as outlined in the law. All right. So in addition to alignment with the standards, there's actually several key expectations for social studies curriculum as outlined and specified in the law. It really emphasizes recognizing the contributions of men and women who have played a crucial role in achieving independence. And this is explored in our classes like American history and government. It also focuses on examining the establishment of the constitutional government and the preservation of our union. And this is again reflected in those American history and government courses that we have in our district. And then additionally, the curriculum is required to incorporate multicultural education, a key component of our American history courses. And we also want to instill that pride and respect for our nation's institutions, which is addressed in our American history, government, and economics courses. So the law requires the use of assessments to measure our students' movement towards the social studies standards. Our districts do have flexibility in how to meet this requirement, and we have chosen to include some projects, more of those performance-based assessments for this, performances and papers focusing on individuals or events commemorating a person or a person commemorated by a holiday. Just some examples, there's lots of these that we have, but in 8th grade, students complete a project on Abraham Lincoln. 9th grade, they have a theme of focus on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and students have projects that they do around that. And then this law also has some very specific stipulations as far as what needs to happen in our K-5 social studies curriculum, what needs to happen in our high school curriculum. It stipulates that all grades below 6 must devote at least 1 hour per week to some of these key purposes, like stressing the contributions of all groups to America's development, discussing noteworthy events and exceptional acts in American history, patriotic songs, respect for the American flag, all of those things. In Grand Island Public Schools, we're really fortunate the majority of our K-3 social studies standards are actually met through our core Tier 1 reading materials, our CKLA resource that we have. So students have the opportunities to explore all of these things all the time within that resource. We do pull in some additional resources for social studies in 4th and 5th grade, specifically 4th grade focusing on Nebraska history, so we need to pull in some additional resources there, so we're making sure that students have that background information on Nebraska history as well. At the high school level, then, we need to ensure that at least 2 courses include specific attention to foundational aspects of American civics and history, like including things about the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, a Nebraska Constitution, local and state government, and the benefits of a representative government. There's also, we need to pull in and ensure that our students throughout their time in high school learning about the duties of citizenship and apply their knowledge of civics, history, economics, financial literacy, and geography. All of these requirements are currently met in high school through our government and American history classes. And then finally, we are required to have information about our social studies curriculum available and accessible to the public. We do have all of this information available on our district website. It's under the Leading for Learning tab. There is a separate social studies tab there where you can go to find out more information about the law and how we meet the requirements. And that's our overview of American civics, and I'll open it if you have any questions for me. I will try to answer them. It is a biannual presentation, so I understand I'll see you again in the spring. So I mean, I'm learning that this is part of this.
Well, seeing none, thank you very much, Mrs. Cool. Appreciate your help.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 6.3, the GIEA request for recognition for 2026 and 2027. Dr. Carrie Kohler. Or Virgil.
Well, I'm not Dr. Carrie Kohler, but, this is an annual process where the Grand Island Education Association asks to be recognized as the official bargaining agent for their members with the Board of Education. And so that's pretty much the sole purpose for this item.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Harden? Seeing none, thank you very much. Okay, item number 6.4, 2025 to 26 GIPS calendar adoption. Dr. Summer Stevens.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So I am here tonight to talk about the calendar. I didn't really help with the calendar preparation this year, so hopefully I will speak about it and make sense. So as you recall, last year we took on the process and we went with a little bit different format for some of our professional learning days. So we're right in the thick of those. We took on a format that we, for some of our professional learning days, we do district work in the morning, and then we have lunch, and then we do some building work, and then they have professional learning communities in the afternoon. So we have several of those days throughout the year. We have a couple of different days that are just building level days with professional learning in the afternoon, and then we of course have our plan and prep days. They appear to be, that was in response to feedback that we had received when we asked about how things are going. Just a side note, we also do send out surveys during the professional learning days. We use it as a way to collect attendance, but we also use it as again, giving us guidance on how things are going. Did you receive what you needed? What could we do better? What more do you need in different areas? And that's been really effective to give back to people who are presenting from the district level, at the building level, and so on. So that information was used to create the calendar that is being implemented this year, and then will also be used, obviously, and was used with the group that was working on the calendar for next year. I personally decided that, in the past, I think you all had Monday and Tuesday of Thanksgiving week, that students didn't have school, but staff had professional learning days. I'd personally recommend we maybe go back to that after this year. Those couple days were a little rough having students. Just making that note. Or maybe just everyone should have it off. I don't know. I don't think that's being recommended in this one, but I don't know how you felt on it. It was a little rough week. Anybody else agree in the back? Okay. Whew. So I'm just sharing a little bit from the committee. This committee this year, super smooth process. Again, last year I felt like it was super smooth. This year it was reported to be, again, really a great smooth process. The calendar committee had at least one person from each building and also included people from the district level, the GIEA, administrators, L4L, Special Ed, Success Academy, Early Learning Center, people representing the activities, and the Board of Ed. So some of you can obviously speak to that being there. There was an in-person meeting in September, and then started a draft, and then we did, there was different meetings back and forth, and email versions, people going out collecting input and so on. And then adjustments were conducted through email following the meeting on the 24th. Some common questions raised. Secondary start and end times, that includes middle and high school. We're doing some work with that. That's not really a calendar as much as it is a scheduling, so those will be kind of separate conversations, and we are doing some work related to start and end times for middle school, and some work on some scheduling components for high school, but that won't be involved in this calendar information. And it came up, and it's probably come up before for all of you, but come up again on creating calendars for multiple years, maybe considering that on the next calendar cycle, maybe next year looking at presenting calendars for 2 years worth of time, so it doesn't have to necessarily come back. Especially this year, we changed a little bit of the formatting, and so it was probably appropriate for this next one, because we're only halfway through this one, and we want to make sure what we were doing works. So we'll have a little bit better idea by the time we get to the end of the year. We try it again next year, but that may be something they want to bring back next year. There were some questions around what about some professional learning days on a Monday versus always having them on Fridays. That came up. And then going back to having an early dismissal on that day before winter break. And so that was something that did come back. So again, pretty similar calendar being presented to you from what we have this year, and just extremely appreciative of the variety of staff on the committee and the history that it existed, things that people felt worked, didn't work. I will tell you, last year and into this year, I just felt like I got a ton of great feedback of people were grateful for the process, and it felt pretty good and smooth, and apparently it sometimes gets ugly. I mean, I know that personally from my own experiences. Sometimes it can be really horrible, but I felt really good about it, and I think it went really well this year. So you all have access to the draft calendar. They're gonna, like I said, go back to the early release the day before winter break, and there will be one Monday that is the professional learning versus a Friday. So that's just some of the adjustments, but you have access, like I said, to the calendar. So if there's questions or comments.
Ms. Albers.
So I was on calendar, I've been on calendar committee for years, and when Dr. Dexter was doing it. And are we doing it earlier than previous? It seems like this is a little earlier.
No,
than-
December, January.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what board members went to the calendar
So
committee?
I don't know who's there this year. Okay, we have
Good.
Josh and Amanda were there this year.
Good, that's
Any
great.
comments? Yeah, if you have comments or questions.
I always thought it went, when I was involved, it just always goes very smoothly. Like, they know what they need, and I just keep my mouth shut. I never talked in it.
Yeah, I know. I don't ever give an opinion, but I do love watching how the process happens. They start at each table, kind of has their own discussion, and then there's a spokesperson from each table that reviews it all in front of everybody. And there just always tends to be common themes, and it's actually delightful, I think, to watch everyone work really well together and listen to each other and be able to say, oh, I hadn't thought of that. I'm at the high school, you're at the elementary school, or whatever, and work together to kind of find a good solution. So it's very pleasant.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much.
All right, so this will come back to you next month for voting.
Item number 6.5, approve a resolution to expand baseball cooperative to include Heartland Lutheran High School.
Guys will get really tired of hearing me tonight. As Mr. Hubbard mentioned earlier, both high school ADs are tied up with activities tonight, so this is actually an item that they normally would be presenting, but and it's a late addition to the agenda. We added it a couple days ago, but earlier this fall, we were approached by Heartland Lutheran High School about being a part of our baseball cooperative. Currently, we are co-oping baseball with Northwest and Grand Island CC, and Heartland Lutheran evidently has some students that are interested in playing baseball. So they had approached us. Mr. Ladwig contacted the NSAA, found out that if we were going to add them, then we had to dissolve our existing co-op and reform a co-op with them as part of it. So we thought all of that was all good and good to go. And then as Mr. Ladwig was working on the paperwork for that at the end of last week, one of the things that he discovered is that with the new co-op, there needed to be board approval of the co-op. So the reality is we're not changing the co-op in any way other than adding Heartland Lutheran. And I think Heartland Lutheran maybe has been a part of the co-op at other times, but hadn't been currently. So anyhow, it is on both as an information and an action item because the application needs to be submitted prior to the January meeting. So, questions about that?
Nope. All right.
If not, then we can roll right on into
Right on to policy.
the exciting parts of policy. So as you look at the policies that are there, those first several policies deal with finances, and actually if I'd have known I was going to talk as much as I did tonight, I would have made Mr. Harden come up and he could have covered all of these, but I shared these policies with Virgil, and then he shared them with the attorney, and basically the attorney said, well, there are probably some changes because of some of the time requirements around hearings and so on. And so, in effect, the attorney recommended that we do some pretty major revisions of these policies. So as you look at policy 4210 there, basically that first part of it that's all in red is the rewrite the attorney gave us, and then he is recommending that we strike all of the old policy and replace it with this one. And then this policy actually replaces 4211. So if we go over here to 4211, you're going to see that this entire policy is struck because it all became a part of 4210. So those two policies kind of go hand in hand. And then 4212, it basically is most of that policy, actually all of that old policy is struck. But then there is just a brief statement about following basically the state's guidelines as far as budget hearings and reviews. So those three policies really go together, and I would answer any questions anyone has about those. There's lots of legalese in those now because they came from the attorney, but I think they're probably policies that that will align with what we need and should serve our purposes. Okay. Are there any questions on that one?
Mr. Hawley has a question.
Oh, yes, he is.
Not a question, just a comment. In 4210, the first paragraph, the superintendent with the assistance of the Facilities and Finance Committee. This is probably the dumbest thing ever, but since it's policy, I believe our committee is called the Finance and Facilities Committee. So,
all right.
If you could switch that, that'd be great.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right, make a note of that, Angela. We'll switch that around.
I'm going to stop talking here.
It's always good to get it right. All right. Any other questions, comments on those first three? Then 4310 deals with local, state, and federal. The only piece that there was on this one was one of those thes on Grand Island Public Schools. So we are proposing that we eliminate that the. And then 4312, internal controls for federal and state. Again, there is a the at the beginning of that we're proposing that we get rid of. But then there are also some other places in here, basically replacing the word maintain with a line, and then take down an E there, take reasonable cybersecurity and other measures. So cybersecurity, obviously, when this policy was originally written, was not as pressing an issue as it is now. But knowing what it is now, the recommendation was that we add that cybersecurity piece in there. And then some other changes in terms of some of the statements that were made down there as far as management requirements. And again, these were pieces that Mr. Harden reviewed. And then down below there, as far as that equipment statement, as far as that aligns with what the federal requirements are. If it's less than 10,000, we can follow the normal district policies. If it's more than 10,000, then we have to follow policies established by the feds. And then we get down in here as far as the bid process when it's above or below 250,000. And again, that's information that we've had reviewed. The contract terms, again, that's all legalese that was added to align with, I think it talks about the Davis-Bacon Act and some of those other things that are a part of the federal requirements that we have to meet. And, you know, it's long, lengthy, and really good reading if you need to sleep at night. Other questions about any of the information that is a part of those policies? The policy committee did do their due diligence, and we went through these things. I wouldn't say we read them word for word, but we did go over the parts that were being proposed to be changed. And again, this is after the attorney's review, so I guess I feel pretty confident that it probably covers what we need to cover.
Okay, seeing no questions, thank you.
All right.
Item number 7.1, budget calendar, fiscal year 25-26, Mr. Virgil Harden.
Well, good evening. Last month, I did a presentation on this, so if you have any questions, I just submit this for your approval this evening.
Okay, seeing no questions, I would entertain a motion to approve the fiscal year 25-26 budget calendar.
I approve the recommended fiscal year 2025-2026 budget calendar as presented.
Seconded by Ms. Albers. Discussion? Seeing none, may we proceed to a vote? Motion passes. Item 7.2, approve a resolution to expand the baseball cooperative to include Heartland Lutheran High School.
Okay, this is the action part of the information that I just shared, so I guess are there any questions that we didn't address earlier? Otherwise, we would look for an adoption of the resolution that the NSAA requires us to have.
Okay. I would entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve the resolution for the baseball cooperative as presented.
Second by Ms. Albers. Discussion? Seeing none, may proceed to a vote. Motion passes. Item number 7.3, board member vacancies. Mr. Fisher.
Okay, back to policies. These were the policies that we reviewed last month. Board member vacancies actually was one that we spent some time with after going through the appointment process, and felt like there were some things that we needed to clean up in that policy. So down here in this application process, basically we talked about making sure the wording allowed for both online and written applications to be filed. Down in the interview part, we talked about each of the selected qualified applicants, not necessarily each applicant would necessarily interview, they had to be qualified. And then interview questions being asked in the same manner with each applicant. And then eliminating that entire piece about the questions and each board member asking one and so on, that were parts that we really felt like, you know, every board, I guess, should determine how many questions they want to ask in that process rather than having that specified. And then down in nomination and election, we talked about eliminating that workshop prior, because again, we know with the limited timeline that there is, that to work in a special workshop where the board members are going to discuss those questions, we felt like that was really probably something that couldn't be handled by the governance committee. And so we talked about eliminating that, and then we talked about using a rubric, and so we had added that rubric piece at one point in time during the discussion, and then ultimately we wound our way back around to thinking that in reality, if you know, there is a tied vote, having additional votes to break that tie, that ultimately there is probably going to be no need for that rubric piece. So that is where we ended up with discussion on that policy. Questions on that one?
Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the policy 2311, board member vacancies as presented.
I make a motion to approve policy 2311, board member vacancies as presented.
Seconded by Mr. Garcia Mendez. Discussion. Seeing none, may proceed to a vote. Motion passes.
Okay, policy 3340, administrator evaluation. This was one of those policies where there were no recommended changes, so this would simply be a review. Questions?
Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve policy 3340.
I make a motion to approve policy 3340, administrator evaluation as presented.
Second by Ms. Albers. Discussion? Seeing none, proceed to a vote. Motion passes.
Okay, policy 4110, physical management goals. Again, there were some minor changes here. We got to cross out one of those, the Grand Island Public Schools. Then down below there in number 1, there was a statement about achieving the greatest educational, and we felt like rather than greatest, most beneficial, maybe would be better terminology. And then down in number 4 here, there's the statement to establish maximum efficiency. We felt like maybe just establishing efficient procedures for accounting and reporting, and then business, actually accounting, reporting, purchasing, delivery, payroll, payment. We all felt like those things were business. So it was a little redundant to have business included in there. And then to take into consideration all procedures, and in there was a statement in operating and planning, and we felt like you just get rid of that operating and planning, and it's just all procedures which will lead to conservation of resources. Questions on that one?
Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve policy 4110, fiscal management goals as presented.
Seconded by Ms. Albers. Discussion? Seeing none, may proceed to a vote. Motion passes.
4120, bonded employees and officers. This was again one of those that there were no changes needed, and this will simply be reviewed.
Questions? Seeing none, I entertain a motion to approve policy 4120.
I make a motion to approve policy 4120, bonded employees and officers as presented.
Second by Ms. Albers. Discussion? Seeing none, proceed to a vote. Motion passes.
Okay, 4210, annual operating budget. Again, no changes recommended, just simply a review.
Make a motion to approve policy 4210, annual operating budget as presented.
Second by Ms. Albers. Discussion? Seeing none, we proceed to a vote. Motion passes.
Okay, and finally, policy 6252, professional boundaries between staff and students. This policy actually goes back to some of the policy work that we did this summer around, just changing some of the structure for what we were doing with our different social media platforms. And this policy, we felt like we still had some work to do in terms of making sure that some of our administrators and staff were comfortable with this. And ultimately, we settled on that statement that is there in the red, adding that statement to what we already had in policy, and that statement simply being electronic communication between staff and students may only take place through school email or district-approved communication platforms. Otherwise, the policy is just exactly the way the policy was previously.
Mr. Hawley.
Mr. Fisher, can you go back to that paragraph, please?
Yep.
So in our meeting yesterday we had with Senator Lippincott, I believe Phil Kuehl was talking about some of the cybersecurity measures that we've put in place throughout the district and how it's a blanket ban on basically 8th grade and below on any social media, and is a blanket ban from 9 through 12 on all social media except for Facebook, because the district is utilizing that for communication, maybe through classroom information or whatever. I'm curious, as we read like the second sentence there, district staff are prohibited from inappropriate technology communication, including but not limited to texting, online socialization, or social networking, including but not limited to Facebook, Twitter, and etc. How are we monitoring that from a Facebook standpoint, whether it is appropriate communication or inappropriate communication?
Well, do you want to speak to that, Mitch? Yes, Mitch will know more about it than I will.
Thank you, Mr. Hawley, for bringing that up. My name is Mitch. I'm the communications director for the school district. And I do work closely with the district IT team on a lot of this stuff. For the example that you cited for why we still have Facebook available on the school network at our high school facilities, it's actually more about emergency communication than it is classroom interaction. Okay. If for some reason we were to need to go into a lockdown, or there was an intruder, or any sort of serious thing like that, tornado, whatever, Facebook is one of the many communications methods that we would use to try to keep updated information out for students, staff, and families. Because when we're attempting to do things really quickly in that sort of regard, the direct communication platform that we have for like text messaging and stuff like that, it doesn't always go as quickly as you want it to. So it's kind of have multiple things in place to do that. So it's more about an emergency piece than it is a classroom interaction.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? And then
yes,
some of the other things that we have a platform in place called Bark that basically monitors on like digital and online communication on the network through things that are like on a school laptop or a school computer. So Google Docs, Gmail, those sorts of things. If it's taking place on a network or on a school device that the school owns, then we're able to monitor those things for key things like self-harm, dangerous conversations, or bullying and things like that. And we get notifications like that so that we can intervene how we need to.
that more answers my question. I think that, so obviously if it's not on a school device, if it was on a personal cell phone to a personal cell phone, nothing we can monitor there.
Bingo.
Got you. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
And again, I would add to that, you know, in terms of a policy, what we are saying is not necessarily that we're monitoring that, but it is prohibited for our staff. And if, you know, again, if we discover, not that we're out looking at everyone's face, but if we discover it, then we want to be able to say that's a violation of our policies and expectations. So again, that's part of why we would have it in policy. Even like Twitter, if we're not even using Twitter, you know, it's mentioned there. We know there's still going to be staff members that are using Twitter. And
sure.
Again, if something comes to light that something inappropriate has been done on those social media platforms, and we want to be able to say, you know, this is a direct violation of our policies.
But this policy is prohibiting or at least discouraging like student-teacher friendships,
Exactly.
coach-athlete friendships on
Exactly.
social media.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I would entertain a motion to approve policy 6252.
I make a motion to approve policy 6252, professional boundaries between staff and students as presented.
Second by Ms. Albers. Discussion. Seeing none, may proceed to a vote. Motion passes. Reports. First up is the Grand Island Public Schools Foundation report. Ms. Lindsay Juergens.
The Foundation's online scholarship application went live on December 1st. Students will be able to apply for 205 plus scholarships through this one application. The foundation hosted our scholarship fair on November 20th at Gish. The fair included scholarship application presentations from the GIPS Foundation, as well as booths managed by several colleges, Education Quest, and Gear Up, which helped students and parents with FAFSA. The foundation board also heard progress reports from the following committees: Board Development, Nominating Committee, and then there are also 3 new board members who were voted on and accepted. That will be Jennifer Worthington, Yetzi Bermudez, and Robert Alexander. They'll all begin their terms in January 2025, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Jurgens. Item number 8.2, Student Representative Reports. Mr. Owen Williams.
So I'll kick off my report with activities. The boys wrestling season started their season on Friday with a dual win over Columbus. They also got second at the Kearney tournament over the weekend. And senior Alex Gates earned his 100th career win over the weekend, so that was a really cool thing to see. The girls wrestling team also started their season with a win over number 10 ranked North Platte, 42-27. For both the wrestling teams, the Flatwater Fracas is coming up for the Islanders. The tournament hosts 30 teams across Kansas and Nebraska. The girls are looking to win the tournament for the 4th straight year, but maybe most exciting, the most exciting is the tournament starts Friday the 20th, which means the wrestlers get the last day off of school for the semester. The boys varsity basketball team started their season in dramatic fashion with a double overtime loss in Buena Vista. They bounced back with a win versus Columbus before coming up just short in an overtime loss to Burke. Both the boys and girls swim teams started out their season at Triangular versus North Star in Southeast. They went 1-1 and have another meet tonight in Lincoln. The Gish Unified Bowling team placed second in districts. This earned them the opportunity to compete at state. The powerlifting team started out their season at Creighton Prep over the weekend. They took 22 students, 10 of which medaled. Matthew Hernandez won his weight class at 165 pounds. And this weekend, lifters have the opportunity to qualify for nationals at the Lexington meet. So now, around GIPS, elementary students across the district have been performing their Christmas programs. And just from my experience, those programs are not only a fun way for students to show off their hard work while getting in the Christmas spirit, but they also, I think, create a connection between families and kind of the school that their child's in. Another great way to get in the holiday spirit is at this year's Seussified Christmas Carol. Am I on now? I don't know.
I'm just following instruction.
About 30 Gish. Is it on or no? Do I need to be louder? Can you hear me? Okay.
Get in that thing. Get in that thing.
All right. About 30 Gish students are working to put on a Dr. Seuss spin on the classic story. They are performing this one-act play on Friday and Saturday evening as well as Sunday afternoon. Gish recently had a college signing day where 7 seniors across 5 sports signed in front of friends and family to compete in college. And then this afternoon in the auditorium was Gish's midterm graduation ceremony. 37 students were honored at the ceremony. And then lastly is my staff shout out. So my staff shout out for the month of December is Miss Kramer. I was lucky to have Miss Kramer as a 7th grade teacher at Westridge all the way back in the 2019-2020 school year. And since I still remember her class 5 years later, I decided that she is more than deserving of a staff shout out. Miss Kramer excels at creating a fun and positive learning environment that starts with the energy she brings in the classroom every day. She makes students want to learn by showing passion for what she teaches. I remember her dressing up as George Washington just to make those COVID virtual lessons a little more entertaining. Ms. Kramer is also committed to building student relationships. She takes the time to ask about students' interests outside of school and builds on those connections throughout the year. Ms. Kramer is also a coach for the Gish girls wrestling team. And another interesting thing is I actually challenged Ms. Kramer over COVID to do the ice bucket challenge. And she was so committed that she actually did it twice because she did not record it the first time. So
she had to dump the ice bucket on her head twice. So thank you, Ms. Kramer, for the long-lasting impact that you have made on both me and students across the GIPS district. And that is my report.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Okay, item number 8.3, Superintendent Report.
Well, Owen covered most of the things I was going to talk about, so no. Winter activities obviously have kicked off at the high school. They've been going for a while at the middle schools. Middle school girls basketball is, wrapping up their season, as is the boys wrestling for the middle schools, and then they'll swap after Christmas here, and we'll have girls wrestling and boys basketball. So I've actually had the chance to make it to quite a few different games. Exciting game with Columbus the other night at Barr. They actually won all three, the CB and A games, and the A game came right down to the wire. But and one of the great things about having basketball in the middle schools and also having elementary concerts in the middle schools, I could go to a concert in the middle of the basketball game and then come back for the end of the basketball game. So, because there are concerts, I've been to a concert just about every night for the last couple of weeks, and they are. It's as Owen said, it's a neat time for kids and families to come together and see those concerts. I was at the both the choir and the band concerts at the high school this week as well, and it's so neat to see how kids move from those introductory classes, especially the instrumental music is the one that always amazes me. When I listen to a sixth grade concert and then I go listen to the high school band and think, yeah, these kids have come, in the course of a few years, because, we listened to, they had the band broke out into the freshman sophomore group, and so you realize those are kids that have only been playing for a few years, and how good they sound now. So yesterday we met with a group met with Senator Lippincott, and we've got a meeting with Senator Quick scheduled next week, so we're really trying to do some pre-legislative session, connecting with our senators, and really kind of trying to get a sense for what they see as issues that are going to be addressed in the upcoming session, and at the same time try and share a little bit of what we feel like are important things for them to know about, our district and the things that impact us. Obviously, the budget shortfall that the state is looking at is I think a looming issue for the legislature, and as I said earlier, I think it will be a looming concern for us as to where that shortfall, how they decide to address the shortfall, and what impact that has on schools. This morning, I actually got to talk to the governor's office. Colby Coash with the School Boards Association had arranged for a representative from the governor's office to talk with us about our cell phone policy. One of the hot topics, I think, for this legislative session is going to be a statewide cell phone ban in schools. I think there's going to be legislation introduced. I think the governor is promoting that, and really we took the time to share with them what we had done with our cell phone policy, and I think really encourage them to think about is a statewide mandate the right direction to go, or is some direction maybe from the Department of Ed with some model policies and allowing schools to make decisions locally around what serves their needs best. So anyhow, we had that conversation this morning. Owen mentioned the midterm graduation. Certainly always exciting to have students graduating, and I think this midterm graduation, it's small, so you really get to see maybe the impact a little more than when we're cycling through 700 kids at the regular graduation. So Other than that, I did want to mention the State Education Conference was held the week before Thanksgiving in Omaha, and I attended, actually presented a session on school finance, and attended several other sessions. I felt like our keynote speakers, were good, had good messages to share, and we did have several of our board members attend, and so I would open the floor up to those of you that were there. If there was anything in particular you wanted to share, obviously one of the great things about a conference like that is just that chance to obviously attend sessions, but I think sometimes the conversations that you get to have with other people across the state is of equal value. So, Lisa?
So I would encourage everybody to get the dates for the conference next November on their calendar now, just to see if you can possibly make it work. I always am amazed at the local talent we have in our state, and I learned so much. And I went to a lot of sessions that were presented by different school attorneys, because you're learning, but it's also like a stand-up. These guys are so funny, and the banter between like even competing law firms is hilarious, and but also you just learn so much about really what's going on in the state, and mistakes people can make, and mistakes you want to stay away from. And so it never ceases to amaze me how much I can continue to learn on that. I also attended the first legislative committee for NASB for the session, and I also attended my first NASB board meeting as well, just very impromptu, very casual, and I was nominated and have been elected to the exec board of NASB as well, and so I was super happy about that, and more to come on that as well. So when we met with Senator Lippincott yesterday. It's all a blur. One thing we have to always remember is we want local control. I mean, even though a ban on cell phones across the state in schools sounds like a great idea, you really don't want that to come from Lincoln. You really want that decision made in the boardroom with administrators and what's best for each school locally. What worked for us and our great PR team was the rollout. We had a great rollout, great information, and really prepared our parents and prepared our students for that. And so what I said to Senator Lippincott was it's going to be local control again. I said, you're going to get sick of hearing me say it, but it always goes back to local control. And when we were meeting today on that Zoom call with the governor's office, it was the same thing. It's just we have to keep harping local control, because we really don't want those decisions made outside of the boardroom. So just always remember that when you're visiting with people, because it's so important that we do what's right for our district, and we can't really say when we're sitting in Lincoln what is right for every district in Nebraska by just one fell swoop. So I hammered local control, and so did Colby today. So we'll just kind of see what happens with that. So there were 3 of us meeting with Senator Lippincott. We're meeting with Senator Quick next week. I know Josh can't attend, and Eric, you can't attend either, so it'd really be nice to have 4 board members there. I plan on attending, so if anybody is available, let's try to be there, because you've got to have, as I say, got to have a seat at the table for them to listen to you. And we've worked with Dan before, so he was a senator 4 years ago. He's familiar with the district. He's a great advocate for our district, big believer in public education, and I think we'll have really good representation with Dan. And that's about all I have to say.
Mr. Hawley.
To mimic some of the things that Mrs. Albers said, the law ones are always interesting. In some of those seminars, they give out examples, and those examples have come from real cases, and it's kind of wild to hear what other districts are going through that we're not. So I'm thankful that we don't have to deal with all those things. But there's so many good seminars every year across different topics, and to me, I have pages and pages of notes, but it's a constant reminder of things that we're talking about when it's the Board of Education and the superintendent, and what that relationship looks like, and do we have a policy for this, or do we have a policy for that? So just nice to have some key indicators to come back and reflect on. But the beauty of it is that we do get to go to whatever we want to. And my favorite seminar was called Stop Calling It Marijuana. Whoever the marketing person was who made that title hooked me. They did a fantastic job. and I was curious about it because it was such an intriguing title. Here's just a couple of the statistics. Youth consumption rate is the highest it's been in 30 years. The THC industry is using the same social engineering that the smoking industry is using, and marijuana side effects include anxiety and depression. And basically the premise behind this is it's not marijuana. It's not the marijuana, so to speak, that we all grew up with. Not saying we all did it, but you guys get where I'm going with that. It's not the ditch weed. The THC in the gummies and now in the drinks and in the candies is so unregulated. There are students that are dying across the nation because they take one and it doesn't kick in when they think it should, and so they take another one and another one. And this is becoming a real problem in states like Colorado, where we're seeing more deaths. So certainly something that obviously our administration is obviously taking a look at. And we have some professionals on staff who have a lot of information about this particular subject. But it was just a fascinating presentation by I can't remember the gentleman's name, but the head of...
Director of the Safety for Nebraska Department of Ed.
Correct. I can't remember his name, but super knowledgeable guy. And it's obviously a resource we can utilize should we need to pursue that any further. But I appreciate the opportunity to go to the conference. It's always good to see colleagues around the state that we know and we speak to each year and catch up on what's going on in their districts and get ideas and so on. So that's it.
Okay.
All right, that concludes my report.
All right. On number 9, executive session for the purpose of negotiations with GIEA and for the superintendent's contract, because it is in the best interest of the public to discuss this matter in closed session. At this time, I would entertain a motion to convene to executive session.
Make a recommendation for the board to convene to executive session for the purpose of discussing negotiations with GIEA and the superintendent contract.
Second by Ms. Albers. Discussion? May proceed to a vote. Motion passes. The board will convene into executive session for the purpose of discussing negotiations with GIEA and the superintendent. Yeah, yeah, we need a motion. At this time, I would entertain a motion to re-enter into regular session.
I make a motion to re-enter into regular session.
Do I have a second? Second by Ms. Albers. Discussion, seeing none. Proceed to a vote. Motion passes. We are back in executive session. The time is now 8:13 p.m. Okay. Item 11.1, approve proposed changes to the 2025-2026 negotiated agreement. I would entertain a motion to do so.
I make a motion to approve the proposed changes to the 25-26 negotiated agreement.
Second by Ms. Albers. Discussion? Seeing none, may proceed to a vote. Motion passes. Item 11.2, approve the superintendent's contract. I would entertain a motion at this time.
I make a motion to approve the superintendent's contract.
Second by Ms. Albers. Discussion? Seeing none, may proceed to a vote. Motion passes. Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Notification of upcoming meetings. Special Board of Education meeting on Tuesday, December 17th, 2024 at 4:30 p.m. And a regular Board of Education meeting Thursday, January 9, 2025 at 5:30 p.m.
So, would interject here. Actually, the special board meeting is advertised to begin at 1 o'clock because that's when we will be doing our new board orientation. And because we will have hopefully more than a quorum, at least at some parts of that day, we will advertise that as a special board meeting, and so it would actually begin at 1 o'clock. And I guess just for a point of clarification then, and that board orientation would run till 5. So anything beyond 5 o'clock would be, something outside of orientation. So I guess the question I think we want our public to be aware of is, does the board want to consider action on the Seedling Mile as part of that special board meeting that we've already have advertised and planned? The 1 o'clock we will have. If the board wishes to consider the Seedling Mile action, I think it would be appropriate for the board to communicate that at 5:15, 5:30, whatever time, basically we're going to be done with the orientation around 5. So if the board would like a break for half an hour and do a 5:30 meeting, but again, I think for the public's purpose, we should set a time when that action item is expected to be considered. That would be the time that we would take public comment.
Does any board member need that? Mike, does any board member need that time, or can we just do it to follow if we're going to be at the training, then we can just do it?
Well, I think you want to set a time so that
Okay.
people have an expectation.
Well, you said it's going to be done at 5, so
I
we
think
could just.
we'll be done at 5, so I would say 5:15.
Okay.
If you wanted to, that would give, I guess, a few minutes of break.
Okay.
Is that enough time for those of you who get off at 5 to be here? Or we need to go 5:30 like we usually do?
Well, we should, who's going to not, are people going to be at the training? We're going to, yeah. Is everybody going to the training is kind of, yeah. Okay. Okay, that's a.
Can we set it for 5:30?
So 5:30.
What
Can
do
you
people
look?
think? What time? Okay,
Okay. 5:15?
that's fine. Is that fine? Okay.
Is that
Yeah.
Is that final?
I'm just getting ready to change it.
Yeah,